Hey, I'm Luke, and this is my wife Alba, and our two boys, Kai and Nalu. But let me take you back to when it was just the two of us. We were avoiding the cold weather and travelling around the south of Spain in our van, a van we bought for less than £1,500. We fixed up the exterior and gave her a fresh coat of paint, ripped out the old interior, prepped for all the new connections, insulated the walls and ceiling, built a new kitchen, cladded all the walls, fitted a new solar system, and made our very own dream home on wheels. But before the two of us became three, we knew we needed something a little bit bigger for our family home. And this is what we found. A 1972 Mercedes 508D. The old girl had been sitting for a while and not in the best condition, so we knew we had a lot of work ahead of us. So be sure to subscribe to follow along on our journey of turning this rusty old girl into a dream family home. Hello and welcome back to episode 3. We're restoring a 1972 Mercedes 508D. So far we've stripped out all the interior, and now you join us as we're ready to start removing all the rust as we get ready to paint the van. As you can see, the van is back to the metal on the inside, and we've now been able to check for any leaks, and unfortunately we do have a few, most likely caused by the rust in the gutters and the bad or just old windowsills. Rust is a big issue on these old Mercedes vans. As you can see, we have it everywhere. Some areas much worse than others. The roof certainly looks the worst, but for the most part it is only surface rust. So the first job is to fix the roof and any leaks to get this van watertight. I start by sanding down the roof. You can see here what a light sand does pretty quickly. All the peeling paint comes off easily, and the top layer of rust also starts to come off. I keep sanding till all the rust is gone and I'm back to bare shiny metal. I then protect it with a rust converting gel before painting. As I want to complete the entire roof and stop any leaks, I move on to the gutters. These are pretty bad and require a lot of work. I sand back any paint that shows signs of rust underneath, then grind out as much rust as possible, till I can only see the metal. Then I apply the rust converting gel to ensure that any rust that I missed is converted into strong metal and shouldn't continue to rust. This was a slow process, as I only have a tiny brush to make sure I can get deep into any cracks or holes that were created by the sanding. But now, the roof and gutters have had their initial coat of paint. I couldn't find the epoxy primer that I wanted on the island where we're converting the van, but I purchased an anti-rust paint, sort of like Hammerite. It's designed to be applied direct to bare metal or even direct to rust, and it stops the rust from coming back. So if I've missed any spots of rust when sanding, I'm hoping the paint will help stop any more coming through. And it can also be painted over, for anyone wondering if we're going to paint the entire van in a dark grey. So now I'll give you a rough idea of how we're tackling the rust and bodywork on this van. As I'm sure you can tell, we're not professionals and we're doing the best we can with what we have available to us. So maybe don't copy us. So mainly we're using a standard drill with a wire brush attachment, an angle grinder and a sander. Then we have our rust converting gel, a few different types of fiberglass and resin, and our Bondo or body filler. I can leave links to the products we used or a similar option that you can find on Amazon down below in case you cannot find them at your local hardware store. As for the process, any large areas where the rust is eating away at the body, we are using the angle grinder to cut it out or back to shiny metal. Any slightly smaller areas of just surface rust, we can just sand back till we get to the metal. We then clean and apply the rust converter gel to remove any rust we might have missed. And for large holes or gaps, we add the fiberglass filler. The fiberglass filler is resin with strands of glass built in, so it dries very strong, and it is very hard to sand, so ideally, this is not for any area that will end up being visible. After this, we apply the Bondo or body filler, as this is much easier to shape and sand. To give you an example of what I'm trying to explain, here I am removing the rust with the wire brush. Then I sand down the entire area before cleaning and applying the rust converter. Now, because I'm impatient, while I was waiting for the rust converter to dry, I wanted to see how the top coats of paint would look. I purchased 2 small tins of what looked like the best option for the paint, a deep red and a creamy off-white. The paint is the same special anti-rust paint I mentioned earlier. I had already painted the roof in the grey primer, but it was a lot darker than the guy in the shop told me, so I wanted to be sure that it wasn't going to affect the final finish of the top coats, as otherwise I might have to paint the entire van in the grey or repaint the roof in a lighter grey. So I painted 4 samples, 2 in each colour. The first will be just 1 coat, the second will be with 2 coats. This way I can also get an idea on how many coats I will need to paint the entire van and calculate how much paint I need to buy. And also this is where I will see how the grey primer affects the colours. Before we go any further, I wanted to say a big thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. If you don't know what a VPN is, it stands for Virtual Private Network, and it encrypts all the data sent between your device and the internet, making sure nobody can steal your information. If you travel in your camper, a VPN is a must, for 2 reasons. In van life, you're likely to find yourself on public Wi-Fi. Here, it's especially important to protect your sensitive information. But also, maybe you just want to check something from back home. With a VPN, you can browse any content just like you would at home, with no restrictions. But why Surfshark? Surfshark is the only VPN provider where with just 1 account, it gives you unlimited simultaneous connections, so you can protect all your devices. It's super fast, and there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk. If you'd like more information, check the link in the description or scan the QR code on your screen now. So now the roof is protected, I move on to some of the worst parts of the bodywork. The bottom of the doors and some small areas that have some damage. For the bottom of the doors, it's straight to the angle grinder, as there is a lot of metal to be cut out. Then I start to work on the rear bumper. The last owner said he knocked it on something, but it must have cracked the metal or paint, and once the water got in, the rust started to come through. I had to cut out a big chunk of metal, and then try to clean up the thicker metal behind as much as possible. Along most of the joints of the sheets of metal on the van, the paint had also cracked, and there was minimal surface rust that needed to be sanded out also. And here is a closer look at the rust converter gel. We ended up using a couple of different versions of this, but most of them work the same. As you paint it on, it's nice and white, but as it starts to work, it turns purple. If there is no chemical reaction, meaning there's no rust, then it turns black. Here you can see the areas where I need more sanding or another coat of the gel as it's dried purple. The back doors are also pretty bad, and I also have a large hole to fill as I've taken out the old electrical hookup, as this is something I will replace. There's also another hole from the old vent from the gas fridge. In the end, we don't use the gas fridge that came with the van, so we no longer need the vent. And this is the driver's door. It's actually much better than the other side, as it's already been replaced with fiberglass. However, the joint between the fiberglass and the metal has cracked. So I make a larger gap or groove so my filler has more surface to stick to, and hopefully this time it doesn't crack again. There is also rust along the wheel arches. This is a very common area for rust, and I use the same method to hopefully remove all the rust. Most of the rust on the bonnet and around the front of the van is very light surface rust, so this should all sand off easily later. So as for most of the holes on the van, I'm filling them with fiberglass, as I do not know how to weld, nor do I have any of the tools. So I mix the resin with the hardener, paint some onto the clean surface on the inside of the van, then apply a sheet of fiberglass. I add more resin and more sheet until it's strong enough. Then, later I will use filler to fill from the other side. Coming back round to the damaged rear wheel arch, I'm using the resin with fiberglass strands inside to fill the deepest parts of the missing bodywork. You can see here how messy and hard it is to work with this. Once the fiberglass is dry, I can put the Bondo on top. This is what will be much easier to shape and finish, so it looks just like the rest of the wheel arch. I also used the Bondo to fill the holes on the rear bumper and the holes on the other side of the van that I filled with the fiberglass sheets earlier. Next, I have to sand the entire van. Any areas I have filled will need sanding and probably refilling and sanding again to get them completely level and smooth before they can be painted. Before I end this video, I thought I would give you an idea of what we're trying to achieve. But as I explained in episode 1, I'm actually recording and editing these videos a few years later after finishing the van. And at the start of every episode, you might remember seeing an image of the finished van. But just to let you know what we were thinking, these are the very bad Photoshop images that I put together at the time. We found a red and a cream that seemed to be the best colour options we had on the island. I'll put a photo on the screen now of the classic Mercedes red that came to mind when I found this colour. However, I did not want the whole van in one colour, so to try and keep it a little cooler in hot weather, I thought maybe a white or cream roof would help. Or option 2 is a white stripe around the windows and white bumpers. I think this looks more period correct, almost like a classic VW camper. Option 3 is to reverse the colours. I think this also looks good, but I can imagine how dirty the roof and sides will look all the time. And finally, option 4 is red at the top and cream at the bottom. So regardless of whether you know the end result already, what do you think? Do you think we made the right decision, or what was your favourite? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.